One, the sessions are always recorded. I appreciate your time being here. Today, the topic I remember sending out to my clients a notice of this webinar. And if you received it either through the Southern California NIOSH Education Center or through me, one of the questions that I asked you in order for you to come to our meeting, and it's really beneficial because just like Veronica said, is you get your CEUs, you get certificate of completion and your CEUs, is the fact that I asked, hey, I know you have not updated your emergency action plan. And I got so many good responses because they're like, you're right, we got to schedule it. So this is a good topic because it reminds us that this is one of those programs, safety programs, that stops being top priority because we focus on other more imminent hazards. Nothing wrong with that, but it has to be scheduled for a review annually. And especially those of you that have things going on, such as remodeling or relocation, expansion, change of layout, etc. This is key. This is very important. And I just had a meeting yesterday, a safety meeting, and we were talking about for this particular facility, they're having to move their entire warehouse around. I think that they're getting a bigger space. And so I asked him if he was holding meetings every day to tell them what were the hazards particular to that morning on a daily basis. And he said, you know what, we're not doing that. And I said, anytime you're doing any changes where, forklifts are going to be taking a different route and there will be merchandise moved from one place to another, and it's not the usual operations, every day you identify those hazards, you communicate with all of the workers because you want to make sure everyone stays safe. So that's just a tip outside of or derived from this emergency preparedness. We first and foremost, we got to prevent these things from happening to us, from happening to our employees. We don't want accidents ending on our desktop and you grabbing your head with a headache because now you're stuck with all this paperwork to fill out because someone got hurt because we failed to prevent these emergencies from happening. Remember that emergencies take place, and so we must have planned responses, and our training, employees training, must kick in so that they can depend on that, and our company will benefit because we'll see a reduction in the amounts of deaths or injury if we are ready to respond. Okay, so let's get started. Like I said, you guys are awesome. Everybody's like, good morning, love the chat. Most of the names that I see here are people that have followed this monthly series webinar for a long time, and I am extremely grateful. As you know, my information is on the screen. I always put my email information right there in the gray alba@getoshacompliant.com. Many of you have sent requests. Many of you have also talked about that 10-hour and 30-hour OSHA class. We just finished 30-hour a couple of weeks ago, and the week prior to that, I also was doing one of those 10 hours requested by one of you. So I am very grateful. Keep them coming because 10-hour and 30-hour OSHA classes are very important to get everyone speaking the same language. All of a sudden, they understand why some of the things that you've been trying to implement are so important, not just mandated, but important. And remember that I am bilingual, so we can bring these services in Spanish as well. So our learning objectives, and we cover them all. There's no, oh, I forgot. I rarely, I think in all of our monthly series, we've gone maybe without covering all of our objectives once, if anything. I'm very much on very adamant about, you set out to cover some objectives, you have to talk and discuss them because a training session must be composed of specific goals, and 3 objectives are great. No more than that. Have your participants walk out your door with 3 things that they can take and apply to the work site. So the first thing is, I want you to master the 5 critical components. I don't know if you're going to become a master at it, but at least I want you to make sure you know the 5 critical components of an emergency preparedness program, emergency action plan that works for everyone, really, from construction to general industry, field work, any of your organizations, really, because it's a mandated program. We're going to talk about those of you that think that it doesn't apply to you because you're way too small. Okay. So from corporate offices to manufacturing plants, why most businesses get at least 3 of these critical components wrong. And we're going to talk about the elements of that emergency action plan and where are we failing and failing royally. Number 2, I want you to those of you that are in the construction side of the equation, many times you go, oh, I'm turning off this webinar. They're going to talk about construction. I'm not involved in any construction activities. I don't care. Remember, many times you have what? Renovation, remodeling, expansion of or inside your facilities. And those are construction activities that bring the issue of safety at the workplace. And you could be involved in a multiple employer work site, and you want to make sure you keep everyone safe. So it's good to discover the construction site specific requirements for emergency protocols. We'll keep the workers safe. And also for those of you that do have construction sites or work in construction, you want to keep your projects on schedule, even if disaster strikes, including the prep step that OSHA inspectors look for first. And yes, I do have some OSHA inspectors that have given me some insight, and I love that. And learn how to create and implement a bulletproof emergency action plan without spending thousands on fancy consultants. So I promise you, I'm not a fancy consultant. I am a consultant though, and I am open to helping you with that as well. Okay, let's talk about this and get to it. What is it? So first of all, we're going to talk about this darn thing. What is it? What is an emergency action plan? What does it encompass, right? It really is a document, and here is the key, because at every 10-hour and 30-hour OSHA class, I have this issue where people open their big eyes and go, it has to be a separate document from your IIPP. If your IIPP is a safety manual where you're listing there that the emergency response is as follows, and then you're just listing earthquake, fire, bomb threat, that's it. You get on with tab number 2, bloodborne pathogens, etc. You're doing it wrong. There's the lack of compliance there. This has to be a separate document, and it has to comply with the requirements of the regulation. Awesome. So it is a plan that describes how employees will respond to emergencies. So obviously, you're going to have a list of emergencies, and then you're going to have what? Who is going to do what, and how do you tell them about emergencies, etc. We'll see the elements in a moment. The emergency action plan has to be unique and customized to your needs. So if you are getting one from your insurance carrier or from OSHA website, that's perfectly fine. I just want you to make sure you read the whole thing and you customize it, change it to your needs. It shouldn't be difficult. It shouldn't be where employees find it too cumbersome to read. So make it simple. Keep it simple. Taking account all of the types of emergencies that have happened in the past and that could happen in the future. So foresee, there's a little bit of foreseeing. I always joke with all of you that you should own a crystal ball and kind of take a look at what could go wrong at my place of employment. That's our job as safety directors of safety people, right? So taking account all types of emergencies. There's a portion of the emergency action plan where I ask you to get input from employees. So jot it down and list what they consider what an emergency is, but don't get too caught up in that, because you will see that you can group them and kind of make it succinct. Make it simple. Yes, it is required. The emergency action plan is required by Cal OSHA and federal OSHA regulations. So you're not getting out of this one. And then you're saying, wait a minute, I thought that, if I have less than 10 employees, I don't really have to have one in writing, because I can just tell them, this is our facility is very small. Here are the exits, and, here are the fire extinguishers. And if something happens, I'll see you guys outside, and I'll just make sure everybody goes home safe, that kind of thing. Well, communicating it verbally is allowed. Do I recommend it? No. Do you have to have one in writing still? Yes. And the reason is, whenever you have designated employees to take action to respond to an emergency and fire, then you have to have something in writing. And so because the actual wording, and this is straight out of Title 8 California Code of Regulations, Section 3220, that says that whenever you have the signet, and where do I find this? Under scope. For those of you that have been to my classes, you know how big we are about reading regulations. And the first thing is scope. Who does this apply to? Do I really need to immerse myself into this, dive and comply? So yes, because look at the wording. Whenever you have designated employees to take action, that's it. It's so broad that, okay, I do have to have them take action. If you have a fire extinguisher and you show them how to use the fire extinguisher, boom, right there. Now you have to have it in writing. If you have to evacuate, boom, right there. What actions? Who is going to actually guide the evacuation and get everybody to the assembly area and account for them? Boom, because you have designated actions for that employee, now you are required to have it in writing. So it is very difficult to get out of having it verbally, okay? Maybe if you're that small and there's really no emergencies, but even there's a couple of things that even if you have just a desk area where you welcome customers and a small warehouse, you have to have an emergency action plan in writing. Can you just verbally communicate? Yes, absolutely. I always wanted to document that you went over the emergency action plan written program with your employees, but document it in writing. Don't just do it verbally and forget about it, because they will forget as well, and you need to have proof that you did it. Awesome. So why do we have this part of why do we have to have an emergency action plan? Is because things can go wrong, and things have gone horribly wrong. I don't know if you remember that fire in the 90s at the Imperial Foods chicken processing plant, and 25 workers died. They were trapped inside the plant, and 52 more were injured. And if you Google it today after this class, you're going to find that there's so many of those employees talking openly about the horrors of being trapped and how it felt to not find your way out. Everything was dark, filled with smoke. They tried to crawl. They didn't know where to crawl to, even though they worked there for decades. They couldn't find their way out. And those that made it is because someone either poked a hole or was able to actually find some sort of respite and air, etc. But 52 were injured. They still live with not just the actual injuries from the fire, but the psychological issues of seeing 25 of their coworkers and some of them family members who died in this fire. And of course, it goes terribly wrong also for the people who willingly, in this case, uh, shut down and blocked those exit doors and exit routes. And in this case, the plant owner was worried about them stealing chicken. So there was something going on there that they had caught a couple of thefts or something like that. You can read the case later. But because of the theft that was going on, he decided, okay, so now we're going to close all the doors where this could the product can be slipping, right? And it turned into a horrific disaster. That's why we have emergency action plan. So we have laws that state what you need to do and how you do it is up to you, but you have to comply with the requirements. So this is one of those performance-based regulations, which means they tell you what you need to do. It's up to you how you're going to comply. Some of these things are specific, some others are not, and we're going to see it, for example, in the case of alarms, systems, etc. Very cool. We only have 1 hour, so let's get to it. We have to start with a question to get you going and to wake up. Okay, so the first question, when there is a spill of a hazardous, thank you, Veronica. Okay, so question number 1, here we go. What do you think? This is a requirement about alarms, alarm systems. You know, if there's a fire or something and the alarm goes on, does the alarm have to be of a specific pitch? And is that the alarm has to be of specific pitch? And everybody says true, false, true. And I see you guys changing. So now, wow, this is quite even on the alarms. 50-50, kind of like, I'm sure they have to be a specific pitch. Oh my gosh, it's almost divided in half. Some of you say that's true, it has to be a specific pitch. And the other half of you says, no, that's false. It doesn't have a specific pitch. Well, I'll tell you the answer to that one. The alarms have to be above the noise of the area and the lighting as well, but it doesn't have to be of a specific pitch. Okay, so that's false. The second one, I know, and some of you are like, what? It just has some requirements as to being audible, but it doesn't talk about pitch. Okay, so it was kind of like a trick question. Awesome. And number two, evacuation drills are mandated by Cal OSHA. Is that true or false? Ah, I love this. So these are my trick questions and I love it. Evacuation drills mandated by Cal OSHA. 82% of you said that's true. 20% of you said that's false. Let me tell you, in the actual regulation for emergency action programs, there is nothing to require the drills. Now, that doesn't mean they're not required. They're mandated and required by what? Fire code and building codes. Yay! So it was a trick question. They are required, but not precisely by Cal OSHA. So many times, California OSHA, as you have known throughout the courses that I teach, they borrow from other regulations already in existence. For example, if we talk about personal protective equipment, the requirements are by ANSI standards, right? So they don't have to recreate the wheel in this case. Same thing for issues with drills. So if you, for example, work for an acute care hospital and you know that you are doing your drills regularly, that's because you're mandated because of the type of building, your occupancy, and it is a fire code that requires you to do them. So awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate that you guys went so fast into answering these questions. Okay.
Alba, before we move on, we do have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back on here. So Mark is asking, would a business continuity plan take place of an emergency preparedness plan?
Continuity or contingency?
Business continuity.
Explain to me a little bit of what that is and what does it contain?
Let's see, Mark, if you want to explain a little bit more, I can go ahead and
unmute him, of course.
Yes.
And also, if he prefers, we can wait till the end of the class to go over his question if he wants to do that. But just hear me out first here. Any other like contingency plans, etc., need to be part of your response. But in any other, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Alba. A business continuity plan is a comprehensive plan in case there's any kind of like major disaster and how the business is gonna continue from that point on. I mean, it does dive into how you're gonna get the business back up and running, but it also does involve some of the same parts of the emergency action plan.
Right, awesome. So you just titled it as a continuity plan, and there's also those contingency plans. I've heard of both. Thanks for reminding me. So it is continuity because you want to make sure that the business does not halt all operations just because of that emergency, right?
Correct.
So the answer is a two-part answer. Number one, yes, it would comply with the actual regulation if, and only if, you go back and read it and you're complying with the elements of the regulation. And many times that's how you actually go ahead and put together those continuity or contingency programs. You take a look at what the requirement is and you work from there with your insurance. So it's probably good to go. And then someone else had some comments too. And you know what, Mark, as I go through the elements today, you're going to see that those are the ones probably included in your continuity plan. And you'll go, okay, so we're good. Does
Okay,
that
thank you
answer
so
the
much.
question?
It does. Thank you.
Perfect. And someone else had another either question or comment in that regard. I think Carol had something to say there. Yes.
Carol, you can go ahead and go on the mic if you'd like to. If not, you can always type in your question too.
All right. So while we wait that she does that, what is it, right? What is it? It's a plan that describes how employees will respond. It must be unique. We said all of this, and it is required. When is it required? There it is, the regulation mark. So we have Title 8, California Code of Regulations, Section 3220 is what talks about the elements and the requirement for the emergency action plan. It's very succinct. It's one of those regs that is very succinct and very performance-based. They tell you what they need you to do. They talk about if you have less than 10 employees, you're not required to have it in writing. Nevertheless, whenever you have designated employees to take action, you have to make sure it's in writing. So I don't want you to get out of it. I want you to have something right. If it's a couple pages long, it's fine, but I need you to have something in writing. Now let's go through the elements so that Mark can go back, and any of you that have an emergency response program that don't call it an emergency action program, you can go back and say, you know what, we have all the elements in place, we are good to go. So the elements per the actual regulation are, number one, it has to talk about emergency evacuation, including the types of evacuation, either shelter in place or actually going outside of the building, evacuation and assembly, right? And the exit route assignments. It also has to talk about employees who remain to operate critical plant operations before they evacuate. And so a lot of that continuity or contingency plans are actually doing this, number two. Number three, account for all employees after emergency evacuation has been completed. So how do you accomplish this accounting for employees? Number four, for employees performing rescue or medical duties, to make sure that you assign, designating, you know who they are, where they are, etc. Number five, the preferred means, so procedures for, number four, procedures for employees performing rescue or medical duties. Number five, procedures for the preferred means of reporting fires and other emergencies. And number six, procedures that include the names or regular job duties of persons or departments who can be contacted for further information or explanations of duties under the plan. All right. So Mark, slide number 9 of this slideshow will get you to go back to it and say, okay, so we're doing this, check mark, check mark, check mark. We're good. We're good to go. I just reviewed it. You review it. You're a-okay. Next year, you schedule your next review, unless something else changes in between. And when we say change, something can change, is either a new process, a new chemical, a new machine that comes on board, then you have to update your emergency action plan if applicable, right? So 1 through 6, you got to go back to your document and review that it contains an explanation and procedures for each of these points 1 through 6. Good? Okay, so slide number 9, super valuable to all of you. All right, so when and what is it that we're doing terribly wrong? Because I promised to also talk about where are we at fault and what are the things that I see most often. Well, this picture on your screen says it all. This I see all the time. So exit doors, exit routes that are blocked are some of the most common cited OSHA violations. It's always in the top 10, you know it. I also find it also in front of the electrical panels and I apologize, and electrical equipment. So it is quite common. And we don't get to remediate these issues unless we're doing schedule inspections. And so it's like a domino effect. The reason why we have these issues is because we are not doing scheduled internal safety inspections. And if you're not doing scheduled internal safety inspections, your injury and illness prevention program is ineffective, which means you haven't reviewed it, which means you may not even have one that it is up to the standard. We do have a class that talks about injury and illness prevention program. Talk to Veronica so we can, it's a full morning. And all we do is putting together your injury and illness prevention program. Because if I see things like this that relate to emergency preparedness, and you're doing that means your IIPP is not effective. You may have it in writing, but it's not happening. Because one of the requirements is the scheduling of those inspections to find out the things that we're doing wrong. So another thing is that our alarm systems many times are out of order. They're broken down. You haven't really checked that they worked appropriately because you haven't done a drill. So your public announcement system is old, and then once you try it, it's like the voice doesn't come out. So guess what? It's not working. Or a phone system. So I have a client who has phone systems where if there's an emergency, it's a box with a phone right at maybe chest height. They open the box and there's the emergency the emergency phone. So they have to pick it up. And for the emergencies, they have to dial a certain code. It's like a 3-number code. So an emergency, they pick it up and they dial it. But guess what I found out? The employees didn't even know what the phone was for. And also they didn't know the code. So when we had our training, we drilled that, because now you're talking about who's going to be doing what are the actual alarm systems and the means to report those emergencies, because it's part of the elements. Remember in my previous slide, you have to have these procedures, and then you have to communicate them and explain them through training. You take a brief moment to read 3220, section 3220 of the regulation, you will find out that there are specific elements of the training as well, right? And I'll show you those in a moment. Sometimes I find that my clients have never invited the fire department to come on board and take a look at what you have on site. And you will find they're so helpful. Yes, they will give you a list of things that you need to fix, but it is all for the compliance, the safety of the workers, the compliance of the organization. Do it. If you haven't done it, do it. They will also tell you, hey, you have a confined space issue, or you have this other issue that you haven't thought of, or hey, I don't have NFPA labeling on the outside of your building, or is faded and I can't see it. Whatever it is, they'll tell you, and it's so important because they will be able to respond better during an emergency. And many times they'll even say, wait a minute, we are not trained in and whatever they tell you, either this confined space issue or this type of chemical is different for us, or whatever it is, they'll have that discussion with you. Very important. The next one, of course, is the one in the picture. Next, not complying with ADA accessibility requirements. So when ADA came in the 90s, talking about accessibility issues and having ramps for wheelchair use and all of that, we thought, well, we're grandfathered in because our building is so old, we don't have to make changes. Well, after that, the ADA made sure we knew that they are not very happy with the grandfathering issues. So they said, if you do any changes to the layout, expansion, repairs, etc., and they have a specific wording there, you must comply. So they want you to comply with accessibility requirements. So go back and review those to find out that you do have this up to par, because you don't want people that have issues with mobility that they're not able to exit and escape during an emergency. We also have outdated emergency phone numbers. This one is universal. I cannot tell you how many times I look into your programs, your safety emergency phone numbers that are posted at the bulletin board or the break room area or where your OSHA posters are at. They are all outdated. There's nobody answering that phone any longer. That's a number that you had there 5-10 years ago. So recreate your list, make sure that your program and the posting of emergency phone numbers is updated. And then not practicing and not doing any drills, because no one really checks on you whether or not you're doing them. Well, don't rely on that. Remember, Fire Code Title 29 says that drills are required in Group B buildings, meaning occupant load of 500 or more persons or more than 100 persons that or below. You need to have drills. Schools are also required to have drills, ambulatory care facilities, etc. So because of fire codes, you are required to have at least an annual fire drill, and some of your buildings and some of your organizations are required to have them either biannually or quarterly. Emergency alarms. Well, these are the requirements. They must provide warning. They have to be above ambient noise and light level. So it doesn't have a specific pitch. That's the word that was the trick question. So it doesn't have to have a specific pitch, but it does have to be above ambient noise and light levels. And at field or construction sites, you have to make sure that if these are not sufficient because they don't go above ambient noise, that for those areas of noise you use either bullhorns, flags, flashing lights, that there is a way to actually provide warning about the emergency. You have to come up with a way to do this. Is the performance-based portion of the regulation. You have to have a way to provide warning to employees. Has to be distinctive, and the employee needs to know how it sounds. So you will never know how it sounds if you do not drill. Auxiliary power supply for devices has to also be present in case there's a power outage. So you have to make sure that you test them when the power is down, you, of course, during your inspections, you test them to make sure that you press the button, find out that they are actually lighting up and working, right? Many times they're not. And once the power is out, you don't know what to do. Less than 10, if you have a small workforce where it's less than 10 people, with voice is sufficient. Can they all hear you? So it's allowed to be just voice alarm, but you have to make sure that everybody can hear. That's the key. If not, you're out of compliance. You also have to tell workers when to dial 911. And I've sent my clients a page by our fire department and our paramedic here in our county, but you can just ask them for the one page to say, these are the times when you do call us, right? And these are the times when you do not need to call us. This is when you call the police department. And basically, it's a page. It's very succinct. It's very simple and very good. But the key there is, you call them anytime you feel you're in danger, and if there's a doubt, there's no doubt, you call them. So they're happy to respond if you feel that there was no other thing that you could do. But they also want you to know that there are some instances where you could just call the police first, or many times the supervisor, after being notified, will make that decision as well. But when there's an emergency, when they need to call 911, they need to know when that is. So explaining this to the workers is important. When to pull a fire alarm, and also internal emergency phone numbers need to be up to par, and they need to be communicated to the workers. So how do you do and when to evacuate? Well, first you start by listing the types of emergency so that you can make a distinction as to when to shelter in place and when to evacuate the building. So group them. Many times when you get input from the workers, there's all sorts of things that come out, right? And they can be grouped. For example, I have had people that say, what if I get jumped in the parking lot? That's an emergency. What if and so it starts to get so long, those being jumped at the parking lot, right? It just gets too long. And as a safety director, you have to be able to group them and say, okay, being jumped in the parking lot is part of the workplace violence issues here. So we have an actual requirement for workplace violence. If you were attending our monthly webinar series, we did that back in, I think it was either September, maybe a little bit earlier than that, in 2024, where we explained the requirements of the workplace violence prevention under SB 553, Senate Bill 553, because now, starting June 2024, we have to have a separate document from the emergency action plan that only discusses issues of workplace violence. And if you're the one writing these programs, you know that difference. And because you know the difference, you know that that one is going to be tackled under your workplace violence prevention program, right? Okay, cool. It's not that it is not an emergency. It's just that you have a different document where you're going to tackle that one, and you have that other different document where you have specific training that needs to be provided for workplace violence. Because even issues of lighting, when you do inspections as required per the workplace violence prevention program, you are required to walk the walk and take a look at lighting issues, right? So you don't get jumped in the dark parking lot. And so now you have that, what is it, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. So workplace violence gets grouped into 4 groups, and that's where you're going to be tackling that. And then that's what you do during these meetings, where people start going crazy with all the types of emergencies that can happen at the workplace. You say, okay, remember we have this one as part of the workplace violence prevention, so we're not going to tackle that one, blah, blah, blah. It's in this program, etc. Here I listed some of the most common ones. You could have different ones. That's why I ask you to customize this program. So fire and explosions, earthquake, injuries, right, or medical emergencies, vehicle collisions, hazardous chemical spills, electric utility failure, fallen power line, and then the workplace violence, which is a huge, different, separate program. In the past, and this is a flag for you, today's webinar should prompt all of you to go back and take all of the workplace violence emergency response out of your emergency action plan and update it, and just refer back to the workplace violence program. So for any and all workplace violence issues, see the different types under our program, specific program under SB 553. And always brainstorm, get their input, maybe something that you're missing there. So, for example, when do we evacuate? If there's a fire, we are always telling our workers, those that are assigned or designated to use a fire extinguisher, they have the actual assignment to and training every year, 12 months is a requirement, only to fight incipient stages of a fire, which means a small fire. They call it the waste basket size type of fire. And so they know that if it is bigger than that, they have to actually sound the alarm and evacuate. You see? So all of these that I am talking about, these are things that you have to have in writing. You cannot just verbally say, oh, whatever, No, these are things you have to have in writing. Then earthquake, for example. For earthquake, you talk about the steps before, during, and after. And for earthquake, you can actually ask them to evacuate after they shelter in place. So you have to have a specific before, during, and after, because it's not just straight cut with the earthquake issue. Why? Because if it's a strong, if it's a small, actually, let me just start. Earthquake requires that you drop, take cover, and hold on, right? So this is basically sheltering in place. And you have to wait for the actual aftershocks, and when everything is calm from movement, because it's not going to be calm because there's going to be environmental noise, there might be small explosions going on because of ruptured pipes, etc. You have to train workers into what to look for and hear. And then after that, they might hear the activation of that evacuation signal, where either by flags or by an alarm or something, or the person designated in their work area is going to say, now those of you that are able to evacuate, let's go ahead and evacuate. And so now they move outside to the assembly areas. Assembly areas also have to be safe areas. They cannot be in the middle of a street or near a highly trafficated kind of street, because then you're creating an extra hazard by putting an assembly area too close to something that is not safe. So active shooter also brings that issue of, use what the Federal Emergency Management Agency says, run, hide, fight. This is basically evacuating, right? But for those of you that are in the line of fire, you're going to have to shelter in place. So that's what you're putting in your procedures. There's a wonderful, wonderful tool by OSHA.gov that gives you the shelter in place procedures, and it's a wonderful guide. I will give you the link in a moment. Just let me actually put it for you. I'm going to put it in the chat. I want you to use this one. There it is. I want you to use this e-tool. So I put it in the chat so that you're able to browse a lot of the wonderful procedures already. Of course, you have to customize them. But for the shelter in place, I love how their example gives you, have employees and anyone else in the building call their emergency contact, then turn on answering systems. So it's kind of bullet point after bullet point of great information. More shelter in place, such as when you have chemical spills in nearby facilities or your neighbors that have issues of process safety management. For example, big vats or tankers or containers that are hooked in a line that is a process. Okay, if something happens to them and there's a chemical spill, they probably already visited you and told you, you guys need to either evacuate on the south end of your building, and it's a whole evacuation or shelter in place according to what's happening or who you have around you. Hurricane and civil disturbances may be also other times when you choose to shelter in place, and it has to be in writing in your program. We have to have established procedures to evacuate. Now, when we talk about evacuation, and we have to have maps, right? So in these maps, we're going to include our escape route assignments, understand who's authorized to order the evacuation. This is why I say you're going to shelter in place, and then you have a person designated to say, okay, let's go ahead and evacuate. Otherwise, it's mayhem. No one knows what's going to happen. And it's a job title, and people need to know that if that person is not present because they were ill or whatever, someone else is in charge. So it could be the lead person if the supervisor is not there at that moment. And all of that needs to be discussed during training, which that's what I do when you call me to your sites. And the first thing you do is you we update your emergency action program. And then when we do training for employees, we talk about which job title. So which one of those people in our training session is going to be in charge of what, right? And if he's on vacation, I always say on vacation, I like to say they're sick or whatever, or injured, but if they're not there, who is in charge of calling out that evacuation? What conditions does the evacuation call for, or is that the evacuation is necessary? And how to evacuate and what routes to take. The exit diagrams are typically used to identify the escape routes to be followed by employees from each specific location. So if you take a look at this, at the very corner, there's a flame. That could be a flammable and combustible room where flammables are kept, and you do not want workers to pass by it. You want to be away from it. So that's why the arrows in your map need to point away from those storage areas and provide with a primary exit and a secondary exit that is easily accessible throughout the area. So here are some of these interactive floor plan examples by OSHA. So when you go to that e-tool that I gave you the link for, you're going to see also how to create this floor plan. And so you have to have a primary and secondary exit, no emergency exits in restrooms, exit away from rooms from hazardous materials, just like I explained. So don't make anybody walk through that area. So away from it always. No emergency exits in narrow passages. So don't direct anyone to go in areas where there's no room for them to exit, or that they will get trampled and it's not wide enough. Remember that there's a requirement for at least 20, I believe it's 28 inches width. And then there's also exit signs indicating the nearest emergency room. Okay, this one is another one that I see commonly violated everywhere I go. Exit signs that are lit up on top of doors need to have an arrow also lit up, pointing towards a direction of travel. So whenever I'm in a building, I look at those exit signs, and many times it is well lit up and there's no arrow. And I know that if I go through that exit, as the sign says, I will not be outdoors. So I need to have those arrows light up. That's a big to-do for you guys today. No use of elevators, indicate which exits for wheelchairs and employees' current location. Okay, so these are just some examples. I'm not gonna go over each of the sample procedures, but this is once you've listed your emergencies, you have to draft your procedures, because that's what you came to this class to do. So how do I do it? Once I listed them and I grouped them, now I can go ahead and provide with a procedure. So how are we going to do it? Do we have a two-way portable radio? Do we have a button? Do we have to just call it out or verbally say something? And then, for example, for something like an injury or a medical emergency, here's just an example. Immediately make the decision and dial 911 if necessary. And I like letters A through I, and I think it was longer than this. It's just a screenshot from one of my procedures, but I always tell people during medical emergencies, you want to get help. Don't take care of someone who is injured alone, because many times we get stressed and we've been working right alongside with them and we faint or something happens. It's always good to yell out for emergency, have a third person help you make that 911 call and notifying management, and then make a decision as to what's next, right? Because you got to make sure that as you're calling 911 and all of that, and you're approaching the person, you evaluate the scene for safety. You make sure you're looking and observing. Do not move the injured or ill person, etc. Create your sample procedure and talk to your designated first aid CPR person. They'll be able to also tell you, okay, well, we don't want to touch someone who looks like they just fallen down the stairs, because we may make them worse, right? Chemical spills is another big one, and this can also happen at construction sites. So make sure that you have basics of emergency response for hazardous substance, products, materials, waste, and that you also have spill kits on site. Anticipate also issues of dust, vapors, fumes, gases, and mists. Anticipate it, and also make sure you're prepared for it, because many times it'll call for that type of PPE. So here's another question for everybody to wake up. When there is a spill of a hazardous substance, what do you do first? Do you control the spill, report the spill, call 911, run from the area? What do you do? Or evacuate? I love it. So I'm getting some good numbers there. Give me a chance to get some water while you're answering. Okay, so let me see what you guys do. You control the spill. So almost half of the room said you control the spill. And then the rest are just all over the place. No, I think we report the spill. We call 911. Okay, the response regarding a chemical issue will highly depend on what you have on site, right? But the first thing you do as you approach and you can tell there's been a spill is report it. So good, good, good. A lot of you go, no, no, no. The first thing we do is control the spill. But you're going to get absorbed doing the controlling of the spill. So that should be your second step. First, report it right away, and then move on to controlling the spill. Awesome. You guys are great. And it always depends. Remember, the response regarding actual chemical spills depends greatly on the amounts, the quantities you have on site, and whether or not you need specialized training, such as hazmat training. Yes.
We do have a question in the chat, Alba.
I'm sorry, Veronica. Let me go through the rest of my slides, and I'm gonna wait to answer the question at the end, if you don't mind.
Yes,
Because
of
we're
course.
running out of time. Thank you so much. Here is sample response steps. This is broad. It can be applicable to a construction site. It can be applicable to your manufacturing plant or your organization. But when you have chemicals and you have a spill, this is a good 1 through 8 response step. Identifying the nature of the spill, observing from a distance first, right? Confining the spill. But I wanted to know that this is not a this is it. Take it, copy it, put it in, you're good. No, it really requires some thought. What is it that we're dealing with? Is there anything, and please write this down. Is there anything we need to do prior to, right? Starting with steps 1 through 8. And then as you read steps 1 through 8, it's like, yes, we need to report it. Let's report the spill. Let's, make sure that someone else comes to our aid and we know what we need to do. Okay, so identify the nature of the spill, observe from a distance, estimate size, determine if needed for a team or if it's a routine or clean type of thing by clean up by trained workers. So many times you have workers on site that are a-okay to do on-site containment and then nothing else. They have to make sure that the hazmat team comes and takes care of that. And that's perfectly fine. But this is a good 1 through 8 sample. For construction, you have to make sure your workers get safety orientation that includes reviewing on-site emergency procedures because they need to talk about what are the potential hazards, hazardous substances, etc. Where are the emergency evacuation plans, etc. And how do they summon help when needed? This is huge. And remember, I promised I would talk about whether or not an inspector is going to be looking at things specifically. Well, they want to know how do you summon emergency services, how quickly they will get to you. And many times workers are like, I don't know, I think I called. They don't even know the number. And then where is it posted? Where are the emergency numbers posted, right? And remember, for construction sites, we have a ratio of 1 trained person in first aid CPR per every 20 workers, for sure. And then for general industry, meaning everybody else, office buildings, manufacturing plants, doctor's offices, etc., it is recommended that you have first aid CPR trained people, but the key and the requirement is the requirement for the provision of medical aid and medical services is that they are able to get to you in the 3 to 5 minute mark. And if you don't have, let's say it's just an office setting, it's up to 15 minutes, right? So it's an interesting guideline that OSHA has issued through a letter of interpretation, and you can ask me more of that later. But that's what the regulation says, immediately or readily available according to the hazards present at the job site. That's for general industry, and for construction, it's usually 1 per every 20 workers on site. So this is a little bit of what I said. Construction, OSHA will show up and always look at imminent hazards, of course, like rebar that is not covered and represents an issue of impalement, fall protection hazard, excavation hazards, chemical scaffolding. But they will look at how do you summon emergency services? Where are they posted? So whatever is easier, how do workers get this information? Is it in the gang box or the trailer? But it needs to be there. Like I said, first aid trainer on site, heat illness prevention on site, an emergency response for heat illness on site, code of safe practices, readily availability of first aid kits. So that's another to do. Many times at your work sites, you fail to have first aid kits. I know you're writing it down and you're like, oh, I need to have that. Here is another example of fire as an emergency. Okay, alerting others, initiate the fire alarm procedure, turn off involved equipment, consider using a fire extinguisher if trained to do so, evacuate, right? So this is where that training comes in place. If you're designated to use a fire extinguisher, must have received training within the last 12 months. If you don't know the past technique, then you're not authorized to use one. Evacuate. Pull the alarm, evacuate. Now, in your emergency action plan, you have fire listed as one of your emergencies. In your emergency action plan, you have the response. So fires, what do you do? Employees discover a fire, what do you do? And you put step by step what and how do they respond. But there is a requirement per Cal OSHA regulations that is separate for you to have a standalone fire prevention program. And the fire prevention program has some elements. And when I send you my slides, you're going to go, whoa, okay, so look at this element. Somebody has to be responsible for this fire prevention program. Why? Makes sense. Someone has to be in charge of making sure that there's not an accumulation of flammable, combustible materials all over the place that creates a fire. So you got to list the types of fire hazards that you have at your facility and the prevention practices, such as if you have an accumulation of paper. Well, waste paper cans are emptied daily and etc. Whatever. This is a screenshot of one of my programs. And the waste plastic discarded daily, etc. So you have to put the types of fires, hazards, and then what are your prevention practices? You also have to do an evaluation. What are the work areas where those fire hazards are present, right? So work area, what's the fire hazard? Office and entrances. I have paper and I have electrical issues too, right? Well, electrical could also create a fire. Metal department, I have metal, paper, plastic, electrical issues. Welding department, sparks, welding equipment, compressed cylinders, etc. So first that analysis of your work areas and where are the hazards. And then, just for welding, there are certain portions of what you do that you cannot so easily in two sentences say, oh, this is how we control the hazards. You have to be a little bit more, you have to have a good explanation. You have to put it in detail. So fire prevention practices, for example, for just cutting, welding, and open flame work are longer, are lengthier. This is not a full list. Bomb threat is one that is missing from a lot of your emergency action plans. It could be in your workplace violence prevention program. So this is one of those that I want to see move to your workplace violence prevention, because it's somebody that is not part of your organization or your operations who is trying to harm employees. And so that's one of the types of workplace violence. And there's an actual checklist with some specific procedures on what to do, remaining calm, keeping the person on the phone for as long as possible, etc. Another example for earthquake, you have to have steps prior, during, and after. And also, another of the things that I see most often that we don't comply with is having these emergency phone numbers handy. When we were doing the 30-hour OSHA class, I saw the emergency operation desk reference listing with tabs, all of these phone numbers, and I loved it. But even more so, the fact that they're going with the QR code now, so they'll have it in writing and also via your actual phone, smartphones. So as you are exiting, you can also just get the QR code and then find out all the information that is contained within this booklet that it is installed near the exit route. This is beautiful. These are the ways to do it the right way. When do you train? Initially, whenever you implement the plan, whenever you make changes, whenever you have deficiencies after a drill, you go, oh, well, the alarm didn't sound over here, we didn't hear it, and annually. So make sure that you are scheduling the training and you don't miss it. And then when you train, make sure that you discuss the following: the actual number of persons. You're going to make sure that you have sufficient persons regarding evacuation procedures, that you're going to tell each of these employees what is the responsibility. So maybe they're just going to be responsible for evacuating orderly, but maybe you do want them to help you sweep the area, meaning as they evacuate, that they just check for restrooms, that no one's in there, close those windows. Those are some of the responsibilities that they need to know is theirs. And you have to review it with each of them, their responsibilities, what they're supposed to do, where can they find it, where is it that the program is in writing, right? It's made available for employee review. There it is, 1 through 8. Methods for alerting, employee duties upon discovery and emergency, evacuation routes, procedures to be followed, special critical operations duties. So for Mark and everybody else on this call, as you go back and look at your emergency action plan, and if it has a different name, continuity plan, whatever you call it, and because it's already drafted and it's beautiful, make sure that your training is covering 1 through 8 on the screen right now. It is a specific requirement as to what you need to discuss with the workers. So make sure you use all of these tools. I have listed them. These are actual resources. I am going to send you a sample plan. Basically goes through the actual requirement of the standard. You have to put, some scope definitions, etc. But it basically covers the elements that you saw in the slide that we reviewed. And for example, the training lists all of the training elements as we saw them on the previous slide as well. But you can use a sample program, no doubt. You just have to make sure it covers all of the requirements of Title 8, Section 3220, right? And let me see if I can just quickly show you that. It's going to be in Word. Yeah, I think you can all see it. So you put your logo, you put the location. So the first thing I start with is, who does this apply to, right? So you have your locations, and many times through this analysis, you go, ooh, I have 2 brick and mortar locations, but then we have all these field workers. How do we put them into an emergency action plan? You just specify it. So you reference the standard, you say what's the purpose and the scope, and then responsibilities. Maybe your name is there as the person who's in charge of the emergency action plan. And then you go ahead and talk about field work, right? And non-routine jobs, because an emergency action response, you cannot miss this. These are some of the things where we miss the mark. You have to make sure that we talk about how is it that the workers in the field are going to be safe whenever an emergency strikes, right? And then we get into definitions, add some of the definitions that may be needed when someone reviews this plan. Then your procedure, attach your evacuation map, which is also posted, account for personnel in assembly areas. How are you going to do it? And also put there that you have a map there where you indicate where are the assembly areas. When do they return to the building? What are the types of alarms that you use to communicate these types of different emergencies? And then you get into phone numbers, right? And make sure that those are updated. You have everything that is needed from fire, police, utilities, etc. I also want you to add your actual name and phone number for your urgent care or the facility that takes care of medical emergencies. And then just start with saying responding to different types, and start with fire. And then, as you can tell there, you have steps on how to respond. And then earthquake, steps to take before, organize. What do you mean before an earthquake? I don't know that an earthquake's going to happen. Well, here are my steps before an earthquake. Remember I told you, you got to take a look at what to do before, during, and after. And so before is drilling. Okay? During, drop, take over, hold on. After, determine whether or not evacuation is needed. Very cool. Medical emergencies even talk about how to prevent issues of bloodborne pathogens, hazardous chemical spills before a spill occurs, be familiar with the chemicals, read your SDSs, and then how to respond to any in this. Okay, so you get the picture. I would highly advise that you prepare it with a table of contents so you can jump around. Call me up if you need help with preparing this document, but I think I've equipped you very well today. You are now able to go back and review the slideshow, look at those elements, and make sure that you are compliant. Thank you, all of you. We covered all of our objectives. I am very glad it's 12:02. I know your bellies are getting hungry. I appreciate your time, and I am going to tackle questions. Questions, anyone?
Yes, so we had a question earlier from Nita Links. She asked, in a multi-level building, what happens when people are in wheelchairs in the case of an emergency?
Wheelchairs. So for mobility issues, it is recommended that you tell everyone how to evacuate, and those with mobility issues, because they cannot use the elevator, you have to make sure that responders know where that person is sheltering in place. Other things that can be done, especially in hospitals, is creating response and response teams. And they do it. They practice on how to get, for example, people that can move onto sheets and rollaways and how to help them out. And this is for things that you already know. But if it happens when you didn't know and you're worried about a visitor in a wheelchair, you leave them there. They shelter in place, and then you just tell responders, this is where this person is at. They don't want you to stay with them, which is very normal and natural. We're human beings that feel the need to stay and help. But the truth is, they rather rescue one person than two. So, two answers to that question, or two portions to that as an answer to that question. Number one, is this a predictable thing? So mobility issues sometimes are part of somebody that works with you. Okay, so plan for it, right? So you have to make sure that they know how to escape safely. If it's somebody that is not part of your regular workforce, but you're worried about visitors with mobility issues, it's about just telling and training employees to instruct them to shelter in place until responders come, and that you have to train employees on exiting and evacuating the building themselves. They cannot stay with the person with the mobility issues. I hope that helped. And of course, for those of you in hospitals and acute care and other types of healthcare institutions, you do have procedures to deal with mobility issues, and you practice them and drill them on a regular basis. Anybody else?
Ingrid had asked if you could please repeat the first aid kit requirement.
Oh, the first aid kit requirements. Okay, first aid kits, they need to be readily available. For construction sites, there's an actual list of the contents, what needs to be inside. For general industry, meaning all of you outside of construction, it just has to be a kit that your physician has approved for the use at your facility. And this is an interesting thing. Let's say you get your first aid kits from Uline, and they sell these big honking boxes full of first aid stuff. They're ginormous, they're expensive, they have everything. And they usually have also aspirin, ibuprofen, and a lot of these medications that people take over the counter. That's a huge no-no. So the actual requirements of what should be in a first aid kit are very basic. Just, your basic tweezers. I just invented a new word. Did you hear that? Basical. I love my English at 12 o'clock. It's starting to go. So it is a list that for construction workers, it's in the regulation. For everybody else, basically you purchase a basic first aid kit. You go to your industrial doctor, you say, can you sign this letter of approval? They sign the letter of approval. You can Google first aid kit letter of approval for general industry. You can get a form. I have a form too. I can send it after this and after this session. And then the doctor signs it, and boom, you have a compliant first aid kit. The doctor is signing it because he's your clinician. He's your industrial doctor. He knows what kind of injuries you have at your facility. And that's the actual requirement per the regulation. The regulation says that the first aid kit has to contain items that are needed depending on the types of injuries that may occur at your workplace. That. Now, That's different from the requirement about having someone that is first aid CPR trained on site. But I think you only asked about first aid kits. So I'll move to the next question.
Yes, we just had some comments. And actually, Mirali's had a follow-up question. She said, including in fire, people that use wheelchairs should shelter in place.
No, that's why I said to you, you're going to make sure that you train people, right? So you always help. For example, I wasn't talking about fire at that moment, but I'll tell you. Something happened in a hotel. We were in a different level, and the fire occurred in the kitchen. So the person with mobility issues was at the very top with me and several others. So we were instructed, we have no way to get that person down. They have to stay behind. There's a fire. Now, mind you, the fire is not right there where they can be burned. It's somewhere in the building. So once you evacuate, you tell responders where that person is so they can help her or help him. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we just had a comment. Robert commented, I just wanted to add that the EAP must be tailored specifically for your job site. Super important not to have situations listed that aren't relevant.
Absolutely. That's why when I said to you and you get workers input because they're able to sometimes put or throw light on emergencies and things they've seen in the past take place at your facility. Be careful because sometimes it goes really wild. They start talking about emergencies that you're like, oh my gosh, how this emergency action plan is gonna get too long. Rupam, I gave you an idea of the basics in this class and work from that. And yes, I did say a couple of times customize it. And even in that sample program that I show you, I highlighted the review, update, and customize to your needs. Very good comment. Yes, for medical services in first aid, that would be section 3400. And that's the one that talks about how fast should paramedics get to your workplace. So remember, that's why I love inviting them to come and take a look at what you have because they'll be able to go, no, yeah, we can respond. We get here in 5 minutes. And you're okay with that. Then making a decision as to how many people you need trained in first aid and CPR can be based upon Title 8, Section 3400. All right. Anybody else?
That's it. Thank you so much, Alba, and thank you everybody who's still here.
This is awesome. Thank you. Yes, you stayed for another good 10 minutes. I am grateful to all of you. I'll see you in a month. And Veronica, thank you.